What was your takeaway from the meetings today between top U.S. and Russian officials talking the war in Ukraine with no one from Ukraine even in the country?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was a pretty interesting day because things kick-started with Rubio, Waltz, and Witkoff basically doing a cleanup job in which they were saying, look, I know there's a lot of complaints about the Europeans and the Ukrainians not being at the table, but look, this is the beginning of a process. They are going to be included in this eventually, but the United States and Russia haven't spoken for years about this conflict, which is true in a major format like this. And so we've got things to discuss, but just as they finished paving the groundwork and sort of doing a cleanup job on that, Trump gave remarks in Mar-a-Lago blaming Ukraine for starting the war, which is an outlook rejected by many observers who note that Russia was the country that invaded Ukraine at the outset of the war. And then basically just dragging Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, for having bad approval ratings. So it was, in some ways, a historic day in terms of the first U.S.-Russia high-level meetings in many years on a very consequential war. And then just a slew of mixed messages with the president and his top diplomats and emissaries, really sort of sending different signals at the same time.
Can we go back to one of those points, Jeff? President Trump saying Zelensky never should have started it. That's categorically false. And you know who knows that? Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, and every single Republican member of the Senate. What is I don't know if I'm going to say what's motivating the White House, but how are they operating with the president in good faith, knowing that he's leading with an absolute lie like that?
Well, you're certainly right that it's categorically false. I mean, you don't have to think about opinion when looking at who started the war. It's more than just observers, it's fact. President Putin's Russia invaded Ukraine. Full stop. That started the war. President Trump knows that. I think maybe if we're looking for an explanation behind what he was talking about today, it's an indication that he's unhappy that Zelensky isn't supportive of the talks that are going on behind his back without him being present. And any criticism that anyone offers to President Trump gets under his skin. And President Zelensky has said that he's not happy about the fact that these talks are going on without Ukraine being at the table. I think it's also important to underscore how big of a shift this is from decades of U.S. policy, but certainly the policy of the previous administration with regard to Russia and with regard to Ukraine. The United States and Europe, strong U.S. allies have worked for the last several years to show a united front supporting Ukraine and standing up against Russia for its invasion. That is all crumbling right now. That doesn't mean crumbling won't lead to some sort of a deal. Certainly, Russia being at the table to discuss this at all will be seen as, by some viewers, as a very good sign. But the fact that Ukraine isn't at that table and the fact that today's talks did not lead to any concessions or any suggestions or hints that Russia was willing to give something up in exchange for some kind of a peace deal does not suggest that they're anywhere near some kind of a deal that Ukraine would accept.
But, Carol, why do we even buy that? Why do we even believe, yes, in face, Russia had a seat at the table, but NBC News is reporting that Vladimir Putin has no interest in a peace deal. And given how well things went for him today, why would he?
You know, this is one of the great, sort of performative shows in some respects, right? Because if the intel is right, and there's no reason to think those intel officials have got it wrong, Putin is pretty kind of in the catbird seat in terms of feeling like he's got a lot of hand with Donald Trump. He feels like he's got a lot of power with this current president. This current president has always lavished a lot of praise on Putin, despite warnings from multiple national security advisors telling him that Putin wakes up in the morning looking for where America is vulnerable and how to poke a stick into that vulnerability and make America weaker. Trump never believed any of his very senior and veteran advisors about that. And Putin knows it. Putin knows that Donald Trump likes him. And I don't think it's any sort of surprise that one of the first things Hegseth, Defense Secretary Hegseth, said when he was in Europe was that Ukraine better basically get more realistic about their boundaries, and intimated that Ukraine will be giving land to Vladimir Putin.
So let's talk Ukraine, John. What's their calculus tonight, in Europe as well?
Yeah, I mean, the feeling in Ukraine is one of extreme anxiety right now. You saw President Zelensky say that he was going to postpone his visit to Saudi Arabia just out of a desire to not bestow any sort of credibility on the talks that were happening in Saudi Arabia without him. He doesn't want to come in and say that, oh, this is okay. Europeans sending similar messages, trying to gather together for a unified message. But ultimately, the Europeans do not have the military might to push back the Russians in a significant way without the United States. It's always relied on Washington's massive military might. So both the Ukrainians and both the Europeans are in a pretty weak position if they don't have alignment with the United States. And that's why you've seen them squirm and really trying to just put this down and try to paper away the differences, but at the same time communicate as best as they can to Washington that this can't continue. You need to incorporate us into these talks.
All right, Carol, new topic. You have got some extraordinary reporting tonight on the high-ranking federal prosecutor resigning over this order to freeze EPA funds. What can you tell us?
I can tell you that I woke up, and very soon after waking up, I got a call from a source who said that Denise Chung, who was until this morning the head of all the criminal prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., had handed in her resignation. And over the course of the day, what I and my colleagues learned was she had been ordered on Monday, a federal holiday, to come into work and to begin issuing a freeze order to a bank, ordering them to hold on to all these EPA funds that were in a bank and had been given out by the Biden administration in grants for green energy and other kind of environmental protection grants. Basically, the EPA administrator for Donald Trump had begun making noise that he thought these last-minute grants right before the administration changed were somehow improper. What this administration did in instructing Denise Chung to create this order was beyond the power of the Department of Justice. And what I think is so important here, Steph, if I can just underline this, is without all the details, without all the technicalities about the grants, this is the first time, and we're in day 30 in this new Trump administration, that we have evidence that the Trump Justice Department has moved to use the power of the Department of Justice, its criminal power, without a factual basis, without essentially a predicate. This is something Donald Trump complained bitterly about and falsely accused the department of, saying that they investigated him without any factual predicate, without any basis. But here is a situation where it is really quite palpably, demonstrably true that they sought to investigate a group of grants and intimate that this was a crime without any justification. You can't freeze bank assets unless you think the assets are tied to a crime. And that is not proven here.
That wasn't the only resignation today, Carol. What can you tell us about the resignation from the public integrity section of the DOJ?
This is a sad story in the sense that, you know, the probably one of the most esteemed units of the Department of Justice is called PIN, Public Integrity Section. These are the people who investigate, Governor McDonnell when he was accused of taking bribes from a businessman and trying to help him with his business while getting a Rolex watch and his mortgage paid in various beach houses. This is the team that investigates John Edwards when a Democrat who was running for president, who was using campaign money and fraudulently claiming that this money was for campaign purposes, but it was actually for a mistress he was trying to conceal. This is a team that also led to the prosecution of Bob Menendez, Democratic senator who was taking bribes from Egypt. They're esteemed because they fight corruption in whatever form it takes, Democrat, Republican. nonpartisan, they go for corruption. They go for the throat when they have the facts. And that team is getting eviscerated slowly but surely because they have refused over and over again orders from the Department of Justice to help this new team dismiss pretty big corruption charges against the New York mayor, Adams. And now, today, another public integrity prosecutor resigned and said, you know, I can't work for you guys anymore because I don't have faith that you're going to support our work, and you're going to fail if you don't support us, and we're going to fail if forgive me, I got that wrong, but you get what I mean. We're both going to fail without supporting each other.